My friends, we have 20 minutes, so we're going to do one last topic for all of you. This is something that Kyle and I were talking about last week, and we thought it'd be an interesting discussion. What's the difference between, let's just call it the top 10, but maybe it's 11 or 12, those that are making the games in one of these semifinals, and those that are just on the bubble, let's call it 10 to 20 or maybe 22, because there are a lot of really good athletes that are maybe like 10 to 12 spots out. So what do you think the difference is there? And then the next topic we'll talk about is what about the bottom 10 to 20?
So I think the first thing, it's interesting to compare the top 10 and then 10 through 20 because they are, for most intents and purposes, relatively evenly matched athletes. If you change the tests, you could have a different order in the top 20. Now, your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth are probably still going to be somewhere in the top 5. And your, 5 through 12 or 5 through 15 are probably still going to be 5 through 15. And then, your bottom 20 of that are probably going to be bottom 20. But it is very test dependent. But I think in general, watching the athletes that were in the top 10 at the North America East semifinal, one thing was apparent, and that is they are professionals. Not in the sense that they are getting paid to compete, although most of them probably are in some sense. They have sponsorships and things like that. But in the sense that the way that they conduct themselves throughout the year and during the competition is very professional, right? And so things that I'm getting at, they all track their food or have a nutrition coach or have someone who's guiding them on that. They all get done with events and they spend time cooling down. Then they go get body work done with their body work person that traveled with them to the event, right? They get done with that and they're refueling well after every single event. They're taking care of that. They're probably visiting the ice bath that they had out there after most of the events. Like they have a very professional routine. It's planned out. They know when they're going to get there. They know what they're going to do when they show up, and they go and they execute. And then you start to look at 10 through 20 and it's a little less rigid in that sense, right? They're a little less professional in their preparation on game day, how they treat themselves afterward. They might or might not be tracking their food. They may or may not be taking care of their recovery. They probably don't have a massage therapist or a body worker that traveled with them. Like they're.
I was back there because I had a coach's wristband. I didn't get a media pass, but one of our athletes gave me their coach wristband. So I was allowed to the back so I could set my laptop down and stuff. And I was they had the free Jocko energy drinks, and I was grabbing one of those. And then some athlete, I don't know who he was like, "Hey man, are those good?
Yeah.
Should I have one of those?" And I was like, "Bro, I don't know."
Don't ask me. I'm just a media guy.
I'm a media guy with a coach's pass.
I mean, that's to Kyle's point. That's a great example.
Out, bro.
Yeah, totally.
That should have been planned out 2 weeks ago. Like you should not ever be taking an energy drink from a container in the warm-up area if you are trying to be a high-level athlete. First off,
not on a whim anyway.
Have you looked at the ingredient list on that? Do you know if it's going to have any potentially banned substances? Have you talked to the manufacturer about where it was bottled and whether those plants, whether the manufacturing equipment was cleaned? That's a serious, serious concern if you're top 10. So when I'm saying they treat themselves like professionals, I literally mean they treat themselves like this is their livelihood, because it is, right? And they wouldn't have gotten to the level that they're competing at if they didn't do that. But I think just watching the heats, even in their preparation, I was back there able to watch people prep and warm up and stuff. And the guys in the top heat, they're very, they're kind of jovial and light until they start their warm up. But they also don't even show up to the warm up area until it's time to warm up. And they're very serious in their warm up, right? It's very focused. They're maybe getting splits and things like that. But then you go back just to the second heat, right? Not so the 10 through 20. Yeah. Or I guess it would technically be 11 through 20, but that heat, you're looking at it and it's a little less rigid. They're a little more distracted. It's a little less people aren't getting splits for them as they're prepping. There's, more questions about what they should do. They're chatting more amongst each other. It's just a very different approach to competition. And the top are the top because of their approach and, other genetics and all those other factors. Yeah. But I think their approach on game day really does allow them to separate themselves from 11 through 20 and then separate themselves even more from, the bottom half of that field. Actually, it would be even more than bottom half, the bottom 40 of that field.
Yeah. And there are exceptions to that rule. There are people that take it very seriously and just maybe missed out because of an execution error or the testing body, as you said. Like those things happen. But to your point, I did find it interesting because I saw several people that were in games contention that were just sitting out there in the stands in between workouts instead of taking care of themselves. And I get maybe they have someone to cheer on, they want to watch a heat, maybe they want to get splits, but they need to send someone else out to do that, and they should be going back to their room or with a therapist, with a PT, whatever, a way to get away from all the chaos, just even emotionally. Like it's loud in there. People are talking to you. It's hard to be able to stay focused on your job, which in any other sport, like the people are really dialed into like, this is my task today and I need to crush it, as opposed to like going out there and being friendly. Now, with that said, Noah does a great job of that. Like he can go out there and talk, and maybe it's because it's his last year and he's super friendly and talks to everyone and still can dial it in. But the difference is when he gets to the back and he starts his warm up, he's like super dialed in, knows
so
what to do.
Focused. But I will say, I think the time, if the sport continues in its, kind of more professional trend, right? If it does continue to get more competitive and better competitors continue to come in and train and people take it more seriously, the days of being able to be lax with your preparation and between events and things like that. And when I say preparation, I'm not talking about your training leading in. I'm talking about your preparation on game day. Those days are numbered, right? It's going to be reduced to the point where there's going to be a clear difference in the field of people who treat it professionally and people who don't.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the preparation leading up.
Yeah.
I think there has to be some differences there too, right? Like maybe most people are pretty serious about their training, but there has to be something between 1 to 10 and 11 to 25, let's say. Let's like give a little bit more grace. There's people that are really good that maybe finish 25th place. Are they doing things differently in the 6 months leading up to the competition that may impact them on competition day?
Well, I think let's just rewind 2 weeks out, right? So let's say we're 2 weeks before semifinal, and you look at that the guys in the top 10, they have to be pretty confident that they have a good shot. And so because they're confident, they're probably more comfortable going through a taper and reducing their volume a little more and reducing their intensity a little more. When the workouts are released, they're probably a little more confident. So rather than testing the workouts in full, they're probably doing intervals of the workouts, just pieces here and there to really test like, okay, what's this bottleneck going to feel like? How much rest am I going to need to take between these things? But for the most part, they've got a pretty good sense of how they're going to operate within each of the workouts. So they don't feel the need to go through the workouts in their entirety. So their taper is probably a little lower volume, a little bit lower intensity than some of the people that are just outside of that cut line who are maybe a little more nervous. And so they're testing the workouts in full. They keep their training volume a little bit higher. They need to feel some of that, that pain and stuff because they're not 100% sure that it's going to be there on game day.
Right.
So just even 2 weeks out, I think there's probably a difference, but that's,
like a confidence issue,
it's
right?
a confidence issue that manifests in the training program, right? I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to do more versus the people that are, pretty confident that they're going to make it. They're like, I'll be all right. I'm going to come in. I'm going to, be very intentional in my training, intentional in my prep, intentional in my testing, but I don't need to test the workouts in full. I'm going to do some intervals of them, make sure that I'm ready to go. Kind of check off some unknowns, and I feel prepared for this.
Yeah. You talk about confidence, and I think I saw it most on the floor. When the last heat walked out, both for the males and the females, you could see the people that were confident, even maybe in a workout that they knew that it wasn't going to be a home run for them, but they knew what they needed to do to stay in the top 10 or to stay in a qualifying spot. And the way they handled themselves amidst the chaos of a workout, when they failed a rope climb or failed a handstand push-up or maybe missed an overhead squat, like watching those people is super impressive to see how well they bounce back and execute even with errors in the actual execution of the workout.
Yeah, they'd clearly been in that scenario before and learned how to deal with it, whether that was a scenario in training, whether it was a scenario in competition. Because let's face it, the guys that are in the top 10 in general probably have the most competition experience in the first place.
Is that where it comes from? Is that where you build confidence? You just have to compete, or can you find it elsewhere?
We talk to our athletes all the time about building confidence. And I always tell people confidence is built through action. You have to go do the thing that you want to do, and you have to test it and poke holes in it and try it. That's how you build confidence. Because if you don't do that, then what's your confidence based on?
Right.
Like a irrational belief that you're going to be good enough based on what? What did you do to prove that to yourself? Yeah. So like the only way to build confidence is to really go out there and seek challenges and test yourself against them. And part of that comes in training. You have to seek that challenge in training and put yourself in competition simulation environments and really, go out there and give everything so that on game day, when you do give everything, where you're going to be. Do you have the ability to go to that next gear, to fifth gear, or is that going to blow you up? Or do you need to stay in fourth gear and pull back just a little bit? Because if you haven't tested that prior, and it shouldn't be in the week leading up or the 2 weeks leading up when the workouts are tested. That should have been done 6 months ago and 4 months ago and 3 months ago in your training and in your training camps and things like that. Like all that stuff has to be done far enough in advance that when you show up on game day, you know exactly how your body's going to operate. If not, you're not in the top 10.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing that I think is a big difference between those that are making the games and those that are not. There's really two scenarios. Either they're just much more well-rounded. They're not making any huge errors on workouts. So we saw this because there was some huge biases in the program. Some of the people that ended up making it were not in a good spot after, let's say, day one.
Yeah.
But they never had like a bomb workout. Some people did. We'll talk about that in that scenario too. But they just kind of were steady, a 14th and a 16th, but they averaged now that they're in 13th to 15th place or something like that.
Those places aren't really that bad.
No,
That's
exactly.
a 7th and an 8th in the old format.
Correct, right. But you get my point, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not that they're like, oh no, I'm outside of qualifying spot, but they're confident again. And then the next day they get another, a 10th and a 12th. And then the next day they get an 8th and a 9th. And all of a sudden they're in 5th overall because they didn't have any blow up workouts and they're just much more well-rounded. The other scenario is you have athletes that, because of the bias this year, that have home run workouts and then they can get away with not being as well-rounded. But few people have just one or two huge home runs where, in other words, they're winning two of the workouts to get 100 points and then they have a dead last. We saw a female athlete that got in because of that.
Yep.
That can happen, but it's just much more rare. And so I think most of your top 10 are those that just, they don't have the workout where you're going to finish dead last or, second to last. You're going to always be in that top 20, whereas the 11th through 20th place, they usually have a couple of the 40th places or 45th place. And so even though they have some good, maybe a 10th place or a 12th place, it doesn't offset enough for the bad workouts that they have.
Yeah, I think the big difference there.
What do you mean? What's the big difference there? Those are two completely different athletes, right? So that might be like the strength or the gymnastics specialist athlete who has two 100,
well, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah. Or the former gymnast that has two 100-point events in this format, like the pirouette and legless and the gymnastics complex. Like those two different athletes are going to have essentially the same scores, not in the same workouts, but the same scores over the weekend based on the testing. And then you have your, well-rounded athletes like your Noah Olson, your Will Morad, just, in our field, at the East semifinal, they're so well-rounded that like you said, they may not have been in a qualifying spot after the first day, but they were pretty confident that I know what I need to do and I'm capable of doing what I need to do in each of these subsequent events.
So Cole Sager's a perfect example of this. I just pulled him up because I already had that leaderboard up. He's good at CrossFit. He's confident and he's just well-rounded. Like he's not going to hit any like major home runs. He has a couple things he's just still really good at, but he goes 18th, 12th, 6th, 24th, 32nd. You get the point, right? Like all of them are good enough where at the end of the day, he finished in 9th and was inside the cut line. Those kind of athletes, I think, are the ones that just make really good games athletes because they don't have something where they're going to finish in 60th place.
Yeah, they're not going to win the games, to be clear. To win the games, you have to have home runs.
Yeah, that's your Medeiros or your, maybe I think Vellner's going to have a really good shot this year because he has those home run. If it's gymnastics bias, he has those home run events.
And to that point, if you're someone that is in that 11 through 20 range, then what you should aspire to is to become more well-rounded.
Yes.
To essentially shore up your holes because if you're in 10 to 20, you took a bigger hit from your holes, from your bad workouts than you did not performing well on what you were good at, right? So like your 10th place in your best event is not more valuable than your 50th place in your bad event, right? That damaged you more than not being in 8th because it's such a small point difference. And also, if you think about it, like what's the lowest hanging fruit? Always improving the thing that you're worst at is going to be the easiest thing for you to shore up and improve and to climb the leaderboard, especially because the way the scoring system works now, man, you are punished in the bottom 40.
Yeah. So here's a perfect example of that one. Scott Tetlow was in the top 10 in a qualifying spot in the West after 3 workouts. He had a 27th and then a 1st and an 8th. He was good at all those events. He crushed them in a good spot. But then workout 4 and 5, which is a little unfair because they were both snatch biased. He got a 51st and a 40th, and then immediately he was just completely knocked out. And so then he had to fight his way back, but he still finished in 16th overall. So a couple 5 spots out of a qualifying spot. But to your point, like if you have those holes, like he needs to be looking at it as I need to get my snatch up. I need to be able to run a little bit faster. And then maybe he's going to the games right now.
Yeah. I know Scott actually fairly well. And he's just he's such a small athlete.
Right.
And he's going to be up against that in, he
snatched 245 versus guys that were snatching 290 and 295. Yeah. So that obviously that's a huge hole. But let's just say, can he get it to 265 or 270? And now he finishes 35th. That moves him up enough to at least be on the bubble. But those are the things. Like if you have a big hole in your game, which it happened a lot this weekend because of the snatch or the run or the dumbbell bench, those are the things that are going to hold you back.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, we're going to wrap up.
Rapidy.
See you guys.
Hope you enjoyed this clip from episode 134 of the Corpus Animus podcast. To hear the other clips, you can click here on the screen or listen to the audio version in full on all major podcast providers.